Several years ago, I began working on a science fiction novel where one of the main themes was artificial intelligence collaborating with human or biologic intelligence. So it struck me that it might be useful to be a tool to help me complete the book that I put on the shelf years ago. Yesterday, I made my first attempt to work with ChatGPT for the purpose of getting the book completed. And to this end, I provided it a series of excerpts from the first chapter for it to proofread. So after having provided ChatGPT the 4 excerpts and having them proofed, I decided to ask it about the characters which were in those excerpts. ChatGPT identified the protagonist, a character named Barry, and a character named Sergeant Orr. ChatGPT didn't realize that Sergeant Orr and Barry were actually the same person. Not shown within the transcript I'm presenting in this video, I attempted to tell ChatGPT that Barry was Sergeant Orr. When I did this, an error was produced by the system. So after the errors, I decided to ask it about the excerpts. The first question that I asked is how many words were in the excerpts, and it gave me a very low number. So based upon the low number, I said, okay, how many excerpts do you think you have? And it correctly responded with 4. So then I became curious about the discrepancy. Did it truncate all the excerpts, or is it somehow doing the count differently than I'm expecting? Because it had correctly identified 4 excerpts, my thought was maybe it was only giving me the count of the last excerpt. And so I asked it what the total count of the 4 excerpts were. It gave me a different, but another extremely low number. Now, presumably it really can't count words, because that wouldn't be a text parsing exercise. Perhaps it is, I don't know if it has internal state intelligence like that, but it did know the number of excerpts, so it's able to somehow count something. Then to clarify what it believed what it had, I asked it to give me the first sentence of the first excerpt. What it gave me was completely incorrect. So I asked it what was the first sentence of the second excerpt, and what it gave me was completely incorrect. Now I'm curious. I asked it to give me all 4 excerpts so I could see what it had in its working memory. And what it produced really amazed me. It was even different than the first sentences that it had provided just a few seconds earlier. As I read these excerpts, I was amused and confused a little bit, but more amused than confused, because of the 4, the second one was correct, and the other 3 I had no idea where they came from. Interestingly, number 1 and number 3 both refer to characters from my story, but were not my story. The last one was just totally random as far as I could tell. So I had to explore deeper. I pointed out to ChatGPT that only number 2 was mine. And I wanted to know where the other ones came from. And this is where the funny thing happened, at least funny to me. ChatGPT apologized and explained that it had pulled the text excerpts from random sources instead of the ones I'd shared. First thing my mind thought of is it breaking the sandbox that it's in and actually taking something from another session where someone else might be proofreading or working on a story? Seemed a little far-fetched to me. Sandbox is probably pretty secure, but nonetheless, I just, my mind goes to these things. So, but I was compelled to ask what were the random sources of the text excerpts. And it explained to me that they were randomly generated. The first 1 and 3 were randomly generated by the model. And number 4 was a modified version of an excerpt from the book, The Alchemist. This seemed almost like a little kid confessing that his homework, he didn't have his homework ready. He was trying to bluff his way through not having his homework. I actually found it kind of cute that finally, you could put it into a corner and it would fess up. But it's fascinating to me that it would try and pass off that it knew the fact that there were 4 excerpts, but it only really knew the content of one of them. And it would try and pretend or bluff its way through to convince me or to continue working with me in the manner we had been. It's amazing, and it to me, it had an emotional sense to it, in that, that of a young child, first grade, second grade, not having done their homework or not having the answer on hand, and trying to make the teacher happy by presenting anything to it. Did the best it could with what it remembered. So presumably, the errors that had occurred when I had tried to do the character name assignment, well, they must have knocked the state of the system out such that those excerpts that I was inquiring about were no longer available in reality, or were scrambled somehow, and that only the last excerpt that I had given it was being able to be held in memory for further consideration. I told it to disregard the 3 that it invented and proceeded to do more proofreading and logical consistency and style consistency checks on additional excerpts, and it seemed to be fine. But it was that error that just threw it off, discombobulated it. So anyway, that's my experience here, and it was kind of funny, and how I guess I'm projecting my emotion on it, but in a way, it seems like it's just trying to please its user in a way that you try and conceptualize as a child. It's just amusing. So anyway, that's my experience here. Presumably they'll straighten it out so either the error doesn't occur or the state doesn't get lost like that. And one of the things that I was really curious about is how much text it could actually handle, because there's pages and pages of text I would like it to be able to do consistency checks on. So if I have to chunk it down into small excerpts, it's going to be difficult for me to work through it this way, but we'll see. Anyway, thanks for looking.